We're going to talk about fear today and anxiety and stress because some of you have mentioned issues related to fear, whether it's dealing with motivation or dealing with self-confidence or dealing with explicitly fear itself. And I think a lot of these problems, though they are a little bit different, tend to have fear in common. I'm speaking again just from personal experience. I'm not going to be citing the sources here. I'm talking about my own life. I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder in my teens, and I think I managed to maintain that disorder, so I got that going for me, which is nice. But I want to talk about my own experience with fear in the hopes that maybe it might help you in some very minor way. And what better way to do that, and what more quintessentially me of a way to do that, than to talk about it using a metaphor. And one of the common metaphors for talking about stress and anxiety is the plate. You know, they say, oh, I have too much on my plate right now. I couldn't possibly take that on. And I feel like this is a weak metaphor because, for one thing, you can always get seconds. But secondly, it implies that all of these things that could go on your plate are nutritious. I like to think of my psyche as a Christmas tree, and I like to think of life as a bunch of 8-year-old kids decorating it. And you have these wonderful branches, you've got this tree, whether it's fake or real, it doesn't really matter. You've got all of these kids that are pulling out these tiny little, very lightweight baubles and hanging them all over the tree. And I grew up with a lot of younger siblings, so if you ever look at a tree that's been decorated by children, it is covered in all of these lightweight decorations, and you would see that inevitably the branches will start to really sag. Now, decorating trees is a weird tradition anyway, but I think if I were to try and decorate a tree, I don't have space in my apartment for one, but if I did, you know, I'd try and keep it minimal. I'd keep it tasteful. Maybe, you know, a garland just kind of stood around there, maybe a star on top, and a few ornaments here and there, just little decorative things, but nothing too overt and nothing too dense. But life is exciting and rich, and there's so many people and so many opportunities that want to make a small little impact on your world. They want to stick their decoration on your branches, and that's a wonderful thing. It's wonderful that there are so many ways that the world can interact with you, but the problem is when all of these things end up resting on your branches or shoulders. I overextend metaphors because I love them so much. Everything can start to sag, and it gets to the point where putting on one tiny little bauble can send the tree toppling over. And the thing about these trees is that they are time constrained, right? Even with a fake tree, you tend to put it away at some point. And so there's a lot of incentive to try and throw as much on it and get as much use out of this tree while we still have the time. But it can get very difficult, especially when you're dealing with the super hyper world of 8-year-olds, to try and say, let's maybe not overload. And the interesting thing, I think, is to recognize that when there's one thing that you discover you're really afraid about, it's rarely that single thing. It's usually the fact that someone is adding that decoration and your branches are already hypersaturated. Right? We're generally not super afraid if everything else is going really, really well. It's usually the combination of all of these things that our brains tell you all forgot. You have to be afraid of leukemia, and you need to be afraid of whether that person was looking at you funny, and you need to be afraid that you won't get enough work done, and you need to be afraid. And it's all of these things. And it makes it much more easy for us to be afraid of stupid, trivial things when they come along because we're already just overwhelmed and oversaturated with all of this junk. But I find that this is a helpful metaphor because I think it allows us to look at these individual things that we carry with us, these fears, and we can recognize that most of them are very lightweight. They don't hold much impact on their own. It's just in aggregate. If we leave them on there and we fail to deal with them, they can make it harder for us to do other things that we might want to do. So I think the first step, at least for me, is trying to recognize all of those little baubles and identify them, give them names, and say, here's all the stuff that I wasn't even necessarily aware that I was carrying around. It was holding me down and making my branches sag. And once we start to recognize that, I think we can look at parts of the tree and say, you know, maybe this patch is a little over-decorated. Maybe I don't need to carry around the fear of leukemia all the time. Maybe it's only fitting, you know, like before a physical. maybe it's not something that I need to worry about on a daily basis. Maybe I can go ahead and take that decoration off and give myself some room for some other anxiety-inducing things. And it's also important to recognize that these bubbles aren't bad. All these experiences, the things that do cause us stress, are a lot of the time positive. They're things that give life excitement and give us a reason to get up in the morning and give us a motivation to do things. It's just that in the aggregate, when we allow them to get all jumbled up and mixed up and dense, that it becomes a problem. So that's the metaphor that I've been using to deal with my fears, and it's helped me to sort of identify areas because when you ask yourself, what am I really afraid of, that's a hard question to answer. But if you try and form it in like a creative process sort of way, it's like, what are the things that are kind of dangling on the branches of my psyche right now? I think that's more of a fun creative exercise than something that feels analytical and frustrating. But anyway, I hope it works for you. I'd be interested to know, what are the things that you carry around with you on a daily basis? What are the things that you are fearful about? And I will talk to you guys tomorrow.